You can have main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 11, Richie Branches Out.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Richie Branches Out.
Okay. We open at the Cunningham house, 2 weeks before Christmas. Marion and Joni are decorating the living room and waiting for Howard to come in with the tree. When he does, he thinks Richie is helping him.
Now, on the count of 3, Richie, I'm going to pull it through. You ready? 1, 2, 3!
But, in actuality, Richie has just come in through the back door. He offers Howard some popcorn, then goes upstairs. Howard says that Richie has been acting strange lately, particularly eating more, which Marion attributes to the fluoride in the water, then suggests that maybe Richie has a girl problem. Howard says he wants to talk to Richie alone, and Marion and Joni go upstairs as Joni complains that Jenny Piccolo probably already knows all of this. Howard tells Richie, who is eating a banana, that there's a rumor going around that Richie has a crush on someone. Richie is annoyed that people are always digging around in his personal life, then confesses to his father that he's got a problem that's driving him bananas.
Loving you has made me bananas.
He's in love with a poster. He pulls it out of his coat and unrolls it, showing his father a girl modeling for Wisconsin Cola. Richie hasn't met her. Howard tells Richie about the summer he fell in love with Gina Harlow and gained 14 pounds. Richie asks if Howard dreamt about her and woke up all tense. Howard says that's none of Richie's business. Richie recounts the recurring dream he's been having about the Wisconsin Cola girl. Richie comes up to her, and she says the slogan,
"Hiya, handsome. Where have you been all my life?"
Then Richie wakes up, before he can say anything. Howard tells Richie his problem is normal, and to talk it over with his friends. They're not going to laugh at him. Cut to Fonzie laughing at Richie in his office.
Didn't you ever have dreams?
I am not a dreamer. I am the dreamy.
Richie laments that the girl is so beautiful he can't get her out of his mind. Fonzie finds the idea of falling in love with a poster unnatural. The phone rings, and Fonzie answers it and makes a date with the girl on the other end. He tells Richie he has to go for real girls. Richie shows Fonzie the poster. Fonzie acknowledges that she's very attractive, but says that pictures don't show you everything about someone. She might be an empty noodle, or dull. Richie shows Fonzie an article that says she finished top 10 in her class, and another article that says she likes swimming, horseback riding, and motorcycles. Fonzie is almost won over, until he says that from the waist down, she could be Daffy Duck.
You're despicable.
Richie pulls out another picture of her, this one full body, and Fonzie tells him to do whatever he can, lie, cheat, steal, to meet this chick. Cut to the offices of the Quick Sell Model Agency, where Richie and Ralph are visiting wearing suits and ties. They're waiting on Potsy, so Richie can fool the agency into giving him the model's phone number by pretending the three of them are hardware businessmen. Richie and Ralph meet with the head of the agency, JB, and Ralph tells him he represents the Interglobal Advertising Agency, and he brought his very wealthy client, Richard Cunningham III of Cunningham Hardware Enterprises.
You boys a little young to get involved with business?
Young? That's what they said about Adolph Manjou.
Richie and Ralph convince JB the reason he hasn't heard of the Cunningham hardware chain is that it's a secret. They show him a map and say that the dots represent future locations of the chain all over the world. JB asks what the red lines represent, and Ralph says,
Oh, those are the voyages of Magellan.
He then claims the Cunninghams are the first family to sell flyers to the Indians. JB says that's crazy, and Richie says that's what the Indians thought, until the Cunninghams sold them nuts and bolts. They tell JB about an upcoming Christmas push, hardware for the hubby, and they're looking for the right Mr. and Mrs. Toole. They already found Mr. Toole. Ralph opens the door, and in comes Potsy wearing a pair of overalls with various hardware hanging from it. He starts singing a version of Mr. Sandman, with the lyrics altered to be about tools.
Mr. Toolman, lend me a wrench, and I'll be over to build you a bench. Yeah!
Richie tells JB they believe they found their Mrs. Toole right here in Milwaukee, the Wisconsin Cola girl. JB identifies her as Angela Beauvais, a very busy girl who won't be available for a couple of months. Richie asks if JB could just bring her up here so they could meet her, and he nearly loses his cool demanding to see her.
I've got to meet Angela Beauvais.
Okay, Richard.
Ralph says they'll have to go with Bess Meyerson, the former Miss America. They'll pay anything she wants. The sky's the limit. JB reconsiders and asks when they want to see her. Richie says tonight. She won't be available until 10 because of a deodorant commercial, which Richie says will be fine, and gives the address of Arnold's. Potsy wants to finish his song. He's got 2 more verses. JB shuts his automatic door on him. That night, Richie's about to leave the house with a camera for some fresh air. Howard says that before Richie drives all the way down to Arnold's, he should know about the call he got from Angela. She knows the address she got was for a drive-in. Howard told her it was a subsidiary of Cunningham Hardware Enterprises. He did it for Richie, and he did it for Jean Harlow and himself. He tells Richie not to tell his mother, and Richie hugs him, thankful that his father is helping him with this massive deception in order to lure a girl to meet him under false pretenses. At Arnold's, Fonzie is taking his annual Christmas card pictures with a trio of girls. He heard Richie was coming down here with a camera and wanted a shot from him. Richie is annoyed but agrees to do it. Fonzie calls for Al, and the owner of Arnold's comes out of the restroom wearing an elf costume. He explains to Richie that they were out of Santa costumes.
It was either this or a gorilla outfit.
Richie takes the picture, and Fonzie and the girls leave. Richie hurries Al out before he can change out of his elf costume. Despite Al having a date tonight, Fonzie comes back in to tell Richie a car is pulled up. Realizing it's Angela, Richie starts to panic about what he's going to say to her. Fonzie shuts him up with a snap of his fingers and tells Richie to relax and listen to him. He gives Richie a note with what he'll say to her. Angela enters and introduces herself.
Hi, I'm Angela.
Richie is so overcome, all he can do is parrot back.
Hi, I'm Angela.
He recovers and introduces himself as RC, the photographer. Fonzie introduces himself as AF, and Angela assumes he's Mr. Tool, to his annoyance. He leaves, after giving Richie a thumbs up. Richie makes up a story about Fonzie helping to appeal to the teen market. Kids love chains and crowbars. Angela says, that's very interesting. She asks him questions about the film Richie is using, then takes off her coat to show she's wearing a pair of short overalls for her role as Mrs. Tool. Richie dreamily tells her he loves her, then claims he meant he loves it. He doesn't answer when Angela asks how he wants her to pose, so she suggests she sit on top of one of the booths.
How's this?
Oh, that's terrific.
Richie stares dreamily at her, and does not take the picture. She cycles through a few more poses, then asks Richie if it would work better if he took the lens cap off the camera. Angela asks Richie to tell her what he wants. Richie asks her to move closer, which Angela does, and they take more pictures until Angela accidentally knocks Richie back into the Christmas tree.
Are you all right?
Angela, I have a confession to make.
Richie confesses to Angela that he's not a professional photographer. Angela is not all that surprised to hear that. She helps get the tree off, and Richie tells her everything. He's not a photographer or a businessman. He's a high school senior who fell in love with a girl on a poster and had to meet her. Angela, bizarrely enough, seems flattered by the lengths he went to meet her, even after he says he's been dreaming about her. Richie says that as a model, she probably has a million boyfriends. Angela says just one.
I'm almost engaged.
Football player?
No, he's a medical student.
Richie tells her not to get married too soon. She could be Miss Wisconsin, or even Miss America. Angela thanks him, and gets up to leave. She asks Richie if he could tell her about his dream. Richie says no, it's too cornball, but Angela insists. Richie says she's the way she is in the Wisconsin Cola ad, and she says the slogan to him.
Hiya, handsome. Where you been all my life?
And then Richie says... He pulls out the note from Fonzie and reads, "Hey, put one right here, baby." Angela says it doesn't sound like him, and Richie admits she's right. He would say something like, "Waiting for you, and hoping that you would kiss me." Angela does indeed kiss him. Richie thanks her, and she's about to leave when Richie says that if her medical student ever gets hit by a train, give him a ring. Fonzie rejoins Richie and Arnold's and asks if it was worth it. Richie says it was. He had to know. He adds that she's engaged. Fonzie says Richie got to live out his dream and offers to give Richie his Christmas present early. Fonzie got him the Pulaski twins, and they're already in his car. Richie is hesitant after Angela, but Fonzie says that if Richie doesn't get back in the driver's seat, he'll end up in a DeSoto. Richie is convinced, and they leave together.
Thank you, Peter. That was Richie Branches Out, which first aired back on December 7th, 1976. It was the last episode of the calendar year. The show wouldn't have another new episode for nearly a month. That night, Happy Days served as the lead-in for a new episode of Laverne and Shirley, in which Lenny and Squiggy vanish and end up in a circus. NBC countered with a new episode of Sanford and Son, in which Fred thinks his furniture has been stolen, unaware that his friends are just having it reupholstered. And on CBS, Tony Orlando and Dawn welcome special guests Abe Vigoda and the Bay City Rollers. Richie Branches Out was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by James Ritz, who had previously written Kiss Me Sickly, Cunningham Caper, and Football Frolics. At the time, James had recently written an episode of Holmes and Yo-Yo, plus a primetime special called Neil Sedaka, Steppin' Out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Sedaka, and I would like to introduce you to the most absolute greatest composer and singer in the whole wide world. My father, Neil Sedaka.
As for guest stars this week, we have two. Vern Rowe as J.B., the head of the modeling agency. Vern was a pretty busy character actor from Washington who worked in TV and film from the 60s to the 80s. Not surprisingly, he made numerous appearances on The Odd Couple. His other TV credits include Bob Newhart, Columbo, Quark, and The Waltons. Plus, he was a semi-regular on Fernwood Tonight. He's also in the 1981 movie Pennies from Heaven.
Pennies from Heaven, a film by Herbert Ross.
Bonus trivia of Vern's real first name is Laverne. So, Peter, what did you think of Vern Rowe as J.B.?
He was a lot of fun. Normally, I think he would be a more ridiculous character, but when our three so-called heroes are pulling off this very obviously fake scheme to get to meet this girl, he comes across more as a straight man, but at the same time, the fact that he buys into their very obvious bullshit does not speak well of him. Maybe it's a sign that he's just very desperate to make money, or maybe he's just very dumb. Who can say?
I was just surprised that he was so low-key. He doesn't seem to be a sleazy businessman. He doesn't seem to be a particularly impatient businessman. He's not grouchy and yelling at them or anything like that.
When Potsy starts singing his Mr. Tool song, he just presses the automatic button and closes the door on him, which, good choice.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, and he doesn't actually have to be blustery or anything like that. So at least I thought that Vern Rowe brought a different tact to the character of J.B. But the main guest star of the episode is Paulette Breen as Angela Bouvet. Paula spent most of her acting career in the 1970s and 80s guest starring on TV shows including Wonder Woman, All My Children, and Wonder Bug starring Jack Baker, a.k.a. Styx Downey. But she did a few films too. MST3K fans may remember her from Parts, the Clonus horror, in which she plays Lena.
Oh.
What?
Your ear. It's like mine. I just noticed it.
Weirdly enough, she gets an introducing credit in that film, even though it was one of her later roles. Fed up with the whole process of auditioning and casting, Paulette dropped out of acting and became a producer of made-for-TV movies. So, Peter, what did you think of Paulette Breen as Angela Bouvet?
She was very likable. She felt very friendly and approachable. And that just makes it all the worse when she decides to encourage Richie's weird obsession with her. Like, no, don't kiss him, Angela. Don't ask him about his dream. Just get out of there. Run.
I would say that Paulette Breen is the saving grace of this episode because her performance is so warm and so friendly and so likable that she sort of makes even this very unsettling story kind of palatable. And she is remarkably patient with Richie and remarkably understanding in a way that most people would and should not be under these circumstances. This plot wouldn't work at all if Paulette Breen hadn't given as good a performance as she does here. As for songs this week, we have a weird mix of music. We'll start with Isn't It Romantic? Written by Rodgers and Hart back in 1932. It debuted in a film called Love Me Tonight, where it was performed by Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald.
Isn't it romantic? Soon I will have found some girl that I adore.
Here it's just Muzak in the office of the modeling agency. Mr. Toolman is a parody of Mr. Sandman, written by Pat Ballard in 1954, originally recorded by Vaughn Monroe, who was later a hit for the Chordettes. And because this is a Christmas episode, we have a couple of Christmas songs. Deck the Halls is a traditional Christmas carol with a Welsh melody and Scottish lyrics written several hundred years apart. And Silent Night is another traditional Christmas carol, this one written in 1818 by a couple of Austrians, Franz Gruber and Joseph Moore. And Franz and Joseph, I would have to ask, did you have to specify Round Yon Virgin in this song? Every year is an awkward moment at Christmas when you have to sing that song in public. Cultural and historical references for the week. Among the Cunningham's Christmas decorations is a box labeled Angel Hair. This was made of spun fiberglass, and it gave Christmas trees a hazy, quasi-ethereal look. Once extremely popular, Angel Hair fell out of favor due to concerns about the substance being toxic to children and pets, as well as a possible fire risk. That shows you how terrifying Christmas was in the 1950s.
You've made it through Halloween. Now try and survive Christmas. Silent Night. Deadly Night.
Marion mentions fluoride being added to the drinking water. This was a practice that started in the U.S. in 1945. Grand Rapids, Michigan was the first community to practice it, and it spread from there, becoming commonplace across America by 1960. It is both safe and necessary to public health, say the experts, but it has been the subject of controversy and conspiracy theories for decades.
Do you realize that fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived, and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face?
By the way, there never was a Wisconsin cola. That's completely fictional. Jean Harlow was the notorious blonde bombshell of 1930s Hollywood cinema. Despite only living to the age of 26, she managed to be married 3 times and make 43 movies, including The Public Enemy, Dinner at 8, and Libeled Lady, plus several films with Clark Gable, including Red Dust and Wife vs. Secretary. Hell of a life. If you look very closely, you can see that Howard is reading the Wisconsin Journal, so good on Happy Days for bringing in an appropriate newspaper. Howard does his impression of Humphrey Bogart, the famed tough guy actor of the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
I've been waiting for you, sweetheart.
But that trope of Bogart saying, sweetheart, seems to come from the 1941 film The Maltese Falcon.
Yes, sweetheart?
Jane Mansfield was another blonde Hollywood sex goddess, though of a later era. The former Vera Jane Palmer of Phillipsburg, New Jersey, she became a leading lady of the 1950s and 60s thanks to films like The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. She was famed for her figure measuring 40, 21, 35, according to Playboy. Those are some Jessica Rabbit numbers there. Daffy Duck was created by cartoonist Tex Avery at Warner Brothers back in 1937 and has enjoyed a long career in film, TV, comics, and merchandise ever since. I suppose from the waist down, he has very skinny legs and large, flat feet.
Well, I mean, from the waist down, he is a duck. I assumed that was it.
There's no other duck like me, because I'm so daffy.
Okay, I'll accept that as the answer. Despite his exotic name, Adolphe Menjou was an American actor from Pittsburgh. He worked steadily in films from 1914 to 1961. Off-screen, Menjou was known for his fiercely conservative politics and his hatred of communism.
Communistic activities, I would rather phrase it un-American or subversive, anti-free enterprise, anti-capitalistic.
On-screen, he was known for his dapper appearance and his well-groomed mustache. There are numerous maps depicting the voyages of Ferdinand Magellan, some of them using red lines. It's really one voyage in particular, his circumnavigation of the globe in 1519. The Portuguese explorer actually died along the way in what's now known as the Philippines, but the expedition continued without him. And with or without Magellan, the voyage went nowhere near current-day Wisconsin. Bess Truman was the wife of Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States. Outside of being First Lady, she was known for her staunch anti-Semitism. Bess Meyerson, coincidentally, was the first Jewish woman to win Miss America in 1945. In the 50s and 60s, she pursued a career as a model and TV actress, probably becoming best known for being a game show panelist on shows like I've Got a Secret. In the 1980s, she pursued a political career only to find herself the subject of bribery and conspiracy charges in what was known as the Bess Mess.
Prosecutors say Meyerson got her boyfriend Andy Capasso's alimony payments reduced by conspiring with a state Supreme Court justice. And the judge's daughter refers to herself as the living bribe.
Woe betide to the person who gets in Bess's way.
5-day deodorant pads are a somewhat forgotten consumer product of the 50s and 60s, so you can still buy them online if you want.
Hello, I'm Ruth Warwick, and here's a wonderful new product. 5-day deodorant pads. It's made all other deodorants old-fashioned.
The address of Arnold's is given this week as 2815 Lake Avenue, which is fictitious. There's no Lake Avenue in Milwaukee. There is a Lake Drive, but I suppose they had to give a fake address because they didn't want people showing up at a real place in Milwaukee and bothering the people. Again, we see a poster for Strategic Air Command. That's a 1955 film with Jimmy Stewart and June Allison. Richie suggests that Angela could be Miss Wisconsin or Miss America. This actress, Paulette Breen, really had been a beauty pageant contestant, becoming Miss Teenage Toledo at the age of 15, and then a finalist for Miss Teenage America, and she did some modeling as well, so that was all based in reality. And we've talked about DeSoto's before. They were made by Chrysler from 1928 to 1961, eventually earning a reputation as clunky, uncool family cars. Howard Cunningham drives a DeSoto, if that's any indication. Other observations. I noticed that the artificial snow that Howard tracks into the house does not melt.
I know that the reason why is that it's fake snow, but it's entirely possible that maybe some kind of environmental catastrophe is going on in this episode, and we're just not hearing about it.
Maybe that's the subtext of all this. This is a silly question, but what happened to the hot air dryers in the bathroom? Wasn't it just a couple of weeks ago that they were making a big deal of those?
So maybe this episode is either out of order, or it's Christmas, and 2 episodes ago was Thanksgiving, so it would make sense that this is a timeline. So I guess the hot air dryers were just removed for some reason?
I guess so, but they were there and now they're not. How appropriate that Potsy should portray Mr. Tool while looking like a complete tool.
Yes.
I don't know if the word tool had that double meaning back in the 50s. Or even
might have had that double meaning in the 1970s, so...
But I just thought that was very funny, that he's Mr. Tool, and then, of course, he comes in, and he looks like a tool. I'm not exactly sure how they did that shot of the Cunningham house with snow on it, since the real Cunningham house is in Los Angeles. I think what they did was they painted snow over a still of the real house. So I think that snow that we see is a painting. That's my guess. And it is a subtle little moment in the episode, but I like Al glumly throwing a handful of glitter in the air as he leaves the bathroom in his elf costume. I don't know if anyone else noticed that, but that was a funny moment to me.
No one can say that he's not putting effort into being an elf.
From Angela's perspective, as we talked about, this should all be very creepy and unnerving. She is meeting a fake businessman under false pretenses in an otherwise empty restaurant at night.
If that happened to me, I would assume that I was going to get murdered. I would not kiss the guy doing it. I would run like hell.
That's why this episode is such a disturbing one now. I'm not actually sure why this had to be a Christmas episode. The main story has nothing to do with Christmas or even winter. Here's my theory, is that this did not start out as a Christmas episode, but they realized it was going to air in December, and then they just sort of retroformed it into a Christmas episode.
That's entirely likely. I do kind of like that Christmas is kind of incidental to the episode itself. I like it when time feels like it has meaning on happy days. I like it when it feels like there is a passage of time happening. It's not all just some weird 50s time warp.
And Christmas is just part of the normal calendar year. I think they did one other episode where Christmas was just happening in the background. Fonz was again posing for Christmas cards.
Tell it to the Marines.
Tell it to the Marines, and they were trying to round him up. And that's not really a Christmas episode, but it takes place at Christmas time. And last but not least here on my list, we met the Aloha Pussycats. We need to meet the Pulaski twins. They've had 3 episodes, at least, with the Pulaski twins being named. I want to know if they're real. What is up with them?
Sadly, we will never meet them.
Aww. So, Peter, what were the outstanding Happy Days fashions of the week?
The only one that really stuck out to me was Potsy's Mr. Tool costume, which consists of a pair of overalls with lots of tools attached to them, and he's wearing what looks like a train conductor's hat. And he's carrying a saw and I think it's a sponge. He really does look like some kind of weird-ass marketing mascot. It's very strange.
I'd at least like to put in a good word for Al's elf costume as well. I think he rocked it.
Yeah. It kind of looked a little bit more like Peter Pan to me, even though the hat was red instead of green.
Just a little bit of pixie dust.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
As season 4 has gone on, we have been asking ourselves, oh man, are we going to get a bad episode soon? And that finally happened. We got a bad episode. I don't think it's as bad as the other Richie Cunningham, by dint of not having any sexual assault in it, but that's an extremely low bar to jump. There are elements of this episode that I like it kind of builds on Richie's tendency to be attracted to girls who are unavailable to him. And in this case, he falls in love with the ultimate unavailable girl, someone whose name he doesn't know, whom he only knows from a poster. But then it goes to some weird, disturbing places where he basically stalks this girl and tries to get her to meet him under false pretenses, alone in an empty building at night.
And his father, Howard, who should be the responsible one, actually enables...
Yeah! Howard, there is a time to let your son make his own decisions, and a time to sit him down and tell him that what he's doing is wrong, and why it's wrong. But on the other hand, Richie's 18. He should know that this is not okay by now.
Why his friends and his parents are enabling this ridiculous fantasy of his of meeting the Wisconsin cola girl from the posters is unknown to me. Why they're spending so much time and energy helping him on this project, I don't know.
Ralph and Potsy are very stupid. That's probably why. But Fonzie also encourages him, and I generally think of him as being more sensible than this.
Yeah, because I thought at first he was like falling in love with a girl from a poster. That's weird. That's dumb. Don't do that. There are real girls all around you. Don't fixate on a girl from a poster, which is good advice. You should not fixate on people in advertisements or posters or things like that. But eventually even he comes around to Richie's way of thinking. And in a way, even Angela sort of comes around to it.
She gives him a kiss. She asks him about his dream. No, Angela. He needs to know this isn't okay.
What I thought was very implausible about this is that Angela is a busy professional model. She's supposedly booked up all the time. Her time is money. So she would not want to be jerked around to go to some random drive-in restaurant where it's not even a real job. The times that she's spending to come down there to Arnold, she could actually be doing some work and actually making money. And she's actually instead having her time wasted by this weird high school kid. The fact that she didn't ask any questions about this job, other than she called up Howard and had a talk with him, and then Howard lied to her.
What the fuck, Howard?
I think as soon as she saw this is not a real job, this is not a real business, Richie is not a real businessman, he's not going to pay me for any of this time that I'm spending down here, I think she would have actually just left. But in this case, she strips down to a very revealing outfit, and then she starts doing suggestive poses all over the restaurant.
I was kind of hoping that when Richie got crushed by the Christmas tree, that Angela would just book it out of there and leave Richie alone. After everything, it's kind of what he deserves.
That would have made a funny tag for the episode where later on Arnold or Ralph or Potsy find Richie under the Christmas tree, and then that's the tag to the episode. But they went in a different direction. So yeah, I think this was the first misfire of season 4. I thought it was kind of thrown together. Maybe it was like one of those ones where they just had to throw together something because they only have a week to put together an episode. But I think Happy Days will recover and recover strongly in the weeks to come. That's my hope.
And hopefully be less creepy. If it is creepy, to not treat it as, oh, it's kind of sad but cute that he went to these lengths to meet this girl. No, it's not.
If it's being creepy, there should be consequences. So I think that's the main flaw of Richie Branches Out. So, Peter, how can people stay in contact with us and find out about what we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Sphericals. That's Sfericals.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysareours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysareourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Fonzie dates an older woman in Fonzie's Old Lady.
Wow, that sounds like a very intriguing storyline. So, see you later, alligator?
In a while, crocodile.
She's a model and she's looking good. I'd like to take her home, that's understood. She plays hard to get, she smiles from time to time. It only takes a camera to change her mind.
I am the Dreamy.